I think we're now recording. I do want to introduce my glamorous assistant down the front here. So Stuart McNeil, who's my CEL for CDT. He's going to help out with the chat and so on while I present from the front. And hopefully this is all going to work. So I'm just going to apologise in advance if it goes horribly wrong. If I drop off, I will get us back on as quickly as I can. So anybody who's online, hopefully that will sort out. Somebody want to just thumbs up to make sure you can hear us okay before we start? Vicky, I can see you in the middle. There we go. Perfect. Loads of waves. Right, so I'm going to make a start then. So what we're here today to talk about is our leadership of change. It is an area we've got excellent for in our inspection, which you can imagine we're delighted about. It is something that I'm really passionate about because I do really enjoy leading change. I like change, and I think it's something that we need to embrace rather than run away from. And if we don't continue to innovate and evolve, then we can't meet the needs of the young people in front of us from day to day because they innovate and evolve. Just look at IT. So what I want to talk to you a little bit about is what we've been up to. What's going to move? Looks like that's fine. There we go. So a little bit about what our school looks like. So first of all, we're big. So we're heading on to the 1400 this year. We have got waiting lists on all of our year groups, hence the huts out the front. We're overdue an extension by about 5 years, which allegedly will be open by August, but we've not even seen signs of a spade yet, so doubt it. But it does mean we're very, very busy. And we've very diverse need. So we do look like the leafy suburbs. As you drive in here, you do come through some beautiful housing schemes. We've got fabulous green grounds, but we've actually got quite a lot of diversity in our school. So our FME is about 7, so not hugely, we're not hugely in poverty. SIMD 1 and 2 is 6.6, and our attendance usually sits about 92, 93. So, things are going well there. Our BPOC young people, we have 21%, so that has steadily increased year on year. So it's almost 0 when I arrived 9 years ago and has gradually gone up and up. We've got 294 pupils in that group. We're now speaking 32 languages, not personally, but across our school, which obviously brings us.
Excuse me, Pauline, sorry, may I interrupt? I'm sorry if this seems rude, but you maybe can't see the chat bar because you're presenting. The slides are jumping about for a number of participants. They're jumping between whichever slide you're on and your profile, your initials. I don't know if there's a way you can maybe rejig that.
Yeah,
sorry, apologies. Thank you.
That's okay. Hopefully that will cure it.
Sorry, it's still jumping around actually.
Yeah, I'm just going to see what I can do there. We'll try this way. Hopefully that will settle it down a wee bit. It does make it a bit smaller here, but we'll be fine. Okay, so try that again. Sorry, we've got smaller in here, but I will manage. So what we have is we now have about 100 staff, so teaching staff, about 40 support staff, so we're quite a large staff, and a lot of that is actually in support. So this is what we look like. So actually, in reality, about 2/3 of our school are reasonably affluent areas, and then a third are not. So actually, there's quite a lot of young people who have challenges here, and that's, I suppose, what is a bit of the hidden issue. In terms of how that affects us, is it tends to be the funding. So if you're funding on percentage of FME, for example, our 7% are quite a lot of young people, but against our other young people tend to get lost a bit. So it can be a disadvantage to be in the Royal High. But you know, we've got other great bits. Our vision and values is something that's really strong to us. I was actually talking to somebody earlier today. We've all obviously got vision and values. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But for us, it's how we live our day. So this is how we actually, and you'll have seen them as you came up the drive. It's what we refer to in everything that we do. Okay, so it's something that we do aspire to live and to breathe in our classes every single day. I'm just going to talk about what that means for us just a second. So in terms of leadership and change, it obviously comes under 3 categories. If you're looking at your inspection coming up, you're looking at your shared vision, your strategic planning, and then that implementing improvement and change. So what I'm going to try to do is take you through our story under those 3 headings. So first of all, looking at the vision. So it's really important that your vision is leading your change, okay? And that's something that wasn't happening in our school. We're very old. We're nearly 900 years old, and 6 years off that, which is quite exciting. We're hoping that King will come in and see us. Who knows? If it's not him, somebody more exciting. So it means that our school can be quite traditional and old-fashioned, and that's what we didn't want to be. So we've had to look and see, how do we ensure that the Royal High is innovative and groundbreaking? It doesn't get lost in that history and tradition. So Viva Schola Regia is our traditional motto, long live the Royal High. Okay, great motto. We hope that continues for a long time. But what we felt is it didn't mean anything to us on a daily basis. And in terms of leading change, it has to. So what would that mean in terms of planning? What would that mean in terms of when you're talking in a lesson? So we did a huge vision and values session in 2017. We worked with Virgin Money, and they do a bit of charity work around schools. And actually, this is a fabulous set of sessions with us, looking at what are we about and what do we want our school to look like. So we worked on, it was basically a post-it note session. So we started with senior teams who started with us. We went up to their offices and they talked to us about, well, what do you want to be as a school? And that's a really hard question. It's a really hard question. What do you want to be, but what do you also want to aspire to be? So we started really unpicking what it meant for us to be the Royal High and what it meant for us in terms of our community. It went on across a whole year. We did the session, they did it with our curricular leaders, and we did it with all of our staff, massive session in the hall where we all put post-its down about what was important. And we also did it with our young people. And then we brought all of that together and we had representatives from right across the community, staff, parents, young people, and we looked to try and disseminate that right down to what would our vision and values look like. And that's where we've got to in terms of we belong here. So we have got, we've got values in terms of what our vision statement says, but everything ties in now to we belong here. That's what's important to us. And what it means to us is when you walk through the door of the Royal High, whatever makes you feel you don't belong, we have to change. So everything we do in terms of planning change has to come back to, does it make people feel they belong here? Are there barriers to them belonging based on what you're trying to do? And if there are, you've got to think again. And that's really important for leading change, is bringing it into it. So it's essentially your daily actions. How you greet young people at the door, how you're planning for an assembly. It can be as simple as if you just jam everybody into the hall at once, how does that feel for young people with sensory issues? Are you taking account of those that can't sit still for the 30 minutes you're going to talk, in terms of ADHD, for example? So what would you do to change that? So really thinking all the time about what we do that makes that work. We've also tied in our positive referrals to We Belong Here. So our values, we write our referrals to our values. So we're making them live for our young people, because sometimes you know how they can be plonked on your front screen as you're here or on your flags, and nobody actually knows what that means at all. And the kids totally ignore it. But what we've tried to do is keep it live. So everything we do, it ties into it, and we use them all the time. It's the language that we use. And as a result, the young people tell us that they feel that they are living and breathing the values of our school. They have to be regularly reviewed. Now that is difficult, because of course you've branded everything, haven't you? You've bought your flags, you got your mugs, the pens are done, and then suddenly you find it's not relevant. So that's a hard one. So you have to think, how often do you review? And what does that mean? Now, we do a bit of an annual review now around our vision and values. So is it still relevant to us? Is it still something that's meaning what it should do? So last year, the kids felt that we should add all, so we all belong here, because they felt that equalities and equity agenda needed to be more specific and upfront. So we are busy moving ourselves around a wee bit so we all belong here. And again, it means that shift in mindset of, are we making sure that all is coming into the planning that we do? So that's really important for us in terms of from the starting point. Once you get your vision in place, and that is, I think you have to start there. So get your vision right in terms of what am I going to look like in 1, 3, and 5 years as well. You know, so you have to be thinking big. And then you need structures to support that leadership of change. So we thought carefully about how do we get everybody involved, because it can't just come from me. I would be a really good dictator. I do like my own way, and I could make all the decisions happily, but that's not how it works, as you know. So we have to have a collaborative structure that works and gets everybody in place and involved. So what we have is this structure here. So first of all, in terms of SLT, we're not SMT, we're SLT. I think most folk are in terms of leadership now, not management. But we have 2 meetings a week. We have a business meeting on a Tuesday after school, and that's really to knock off the stuff that's happening. You know, your health and safety, you know, what big policies are coming through, what decisions do we need to make on a weekly basis. You'll all have them. We also have a curricular leader who's represented at that meeting. It's the same person all year. So the curricular leader group vote in who it's going to be. And they are then the conduit between ourselves and that group. So they bring the issues from them and they take the questions from us to them as well. So they are able to then breach that gap of, you know, making sure that everybody hears about what's happening at senior leadership team. We also have an admin representative. That's normally our business manager, but she ensures that at her weekly meeting with our team, she takes back everything that's happening as well. And that's at the business meeting. I'll go into communications at the end, but we do have a weekly staff bulletin where I put on any decisions that are coming through from SLT so that everybody knows it's coming, no surprises, no secrets. Okay, so I do have that on there as well. Then we have a senior leadership weekly improvement meeting. Now that's been a bit of a game changer for us because we protect it. So we have a duty head system here, so we can easily run around like the 4th Emergency Service all day, all on Friday. But what we do is we have somebody else cover on a Friday for 2 periods so that we can sit down and just have a chance to think about improvement. And I'll talk a wee bit in a minute about what that might look like, but it's absolutely focused on that. And I get really grumpy if one of the senior team disappear from that to do something else because we protect it. Okay, that's important because otherwise we can't drive improvement. If all you're doing is running around the school all week, you can't drive that improvement. So giving a bit of headspace in there. For our curricular leaders, we have 14 of them. We have some principal teachers as well who are in our bases. So all of them, they have a Friday morning business meeting. That's during our extended form. And again, that's about sharing information, any of the quick decisions that need to go through, things like, you know, not the biggie stuff, but really the quick stuff that you can just knock off so that they are kept well in the loop. The expectation is the curricular leaders take that back to their departmentals, whether they're weekly or fortnightly, and that they are bringing the views of those staff into that meeting. Okay. They also have a weekly improvement period. So we've protected, and we started it last year, protected 1 period a week where they're all free and it's part of their contact and they're expected to turn up for that every week. And that's really about improvement. And I'll talk about that one in a minute as well. Our pupils are heavily involved. So our pupil voice structure is complicated. It involves lots of young people. And it's really designed to be sort of an interweaving net. That means that they can all get a voice in from lots of different areas in our school. And they feed into our pupil improvement groups. So again, I'll talk about them later on, but that's really to ensure that their voice is heard and they feed in to senior leadership team. Our school captains bring their voice to the senior leadership team about every 2 to 3 weeks. They'll come along for a slot and they'll tell us what's happening on the ground, what they think we need to change, what's coming from the young people, or how the improvement groups are progressing. So keeping us all in that loop. They're really honest. be a bit too honest. And then we have staff leadership roles in place. I've put 330 there. I meant to say 30. I've added an extra 3. I'll fix that. There's 30 this year, and leadership roles, they have to interview for them. Those are linked to an improvement plan, and they are also part of the structure for leadership of change. So that's the structure bit behind what we're doing. And then we need to look at knowing the why. So why do we need to change? Because otherwise you're just doing it and it's pointless. And if nobody's buying into what you're trying to do, it doesn't really happen, or it's a bit meh and falls flat. So we really look at the why here. So obviously national priorities, they're there, and the council priorities, which are beginning to localise them to ourselves. But we and our learning community, so our 4 primaries also input as well what they think we should be driving in terms of change. We also engage very highly with national and international policy and practice. So we make sure our staff get time to read papers, to discuss them, to take part in reviews such as the Hayward Review. We find the time, so it might mean we're having to juggle other things off the agenda. But if something's coming through we feel is important in terms of the why, then we make time for it to get that in there. So what happens as a result there is we've got a really clear steer about where we're going. So we've got our overarching vision of We Belong Here, and then we've got a really clear steer about how that fits into the national and international agenda, and then how we localise that for ourselves. That's been really important because it gives you direction, and really clear direction, so there's no wandering. I don't like the wandering. It doesn't mean we don't do little tests of change, but it means we've got a really clear focus about where we're going, and we've all got that focus, so we're all driving it together. So an example would be improving attendance or closing the poverty attainment gap. That's an absolute driver here in this school. So everybody knows they've got to contribute to making that happen. And it's something that we will regularly check in on, and we know we're trying to drive together to get there. Okay, and then everything else round about it is how it supports. Moving on then to the evaluation. Data is important in the why. You'll know that, okay? But we have a really robust system of evaluating data that we have in the school. We're very data heavy here. We do gather a lot of data through tracking, through insights, through various sections that give us information. So we do have this huge amount, all on spreadsheets. But what's really important is we evaluate that data, and it tells us, why are we having to change something, or is it giving us information that things are happening in the right direction? So we obviously have robust tracking. We've got at all levels. So our tracking is right through from the teacher in the classroom, the faculty, right through to SLT, and then myself. We have a great triangular system that shows us what's happening at all levels, so we actually can identify areas of need. Now, that might be as simple as a young person that we can see is needing something intervening, or it might be that I can see there's trends coming through, and that might be trends I need to improve straight away, or it might be something that I'm thinking, look, that's something we need to be aware of coming into this time of year when we're looking at our why again. We analyse our results, but that's one set of data. But we do analyse our results, particularly for young people who we've maybe been trying to improve data for. At insight meetings, I don't know what the next one is. Insight meetings is with all subjects. So obviously we have insight with our SLT, but I then have every subject in with their nation leads to talk about how that subject did. What are the trends? How's it looking in terms of the areas that we've been looking at? And then how will that contribute to your improvement plan going forward? So having that flexible improvement is there, and that's helped with some of the smaller changes to improve. Sharing with cluster primaries. So going right back to, so we track data from, so for example, your SNSA contributes to where you should be in first year. So if you're in the top level in SNSA, you definitely should be in the top level if you're tracking through the BGE. How does that improve? What does that then look like when they go into fourth year? So if someone's coming in the top end of SNSA, they absolutely shouldn't be a band C in National 5. If they are, why? What happened? How did that actually not improve over time? But with our primaries, we go back to them and we share that as well. So the levers are the big one I do. So I just do a little bit of data matching, and from the insight data set that you get, I give all the primaries the levers data. So Crammon Primary, for example, gets Crammon Primaries, 4, 5, 6 leavers. And then I have a discussion with Crammon Primary and the teachers who would have been Primary 7 when they were there, because a lot of them are still there, about where they got to. What we're able to identify then is, first of all, trends such as literacy and numeracy. Is that improving? Or is it taking a dive? What did it look like against the bell curve that came in versus where it is now? Is it an issue? Leaver data, so where did they go to? And for some of them, it's really nice. They get, oh, look, wee Johnny went to uni. I never thought he would. Or, oh my God, they're okay. That kind of thing. But for some of them, well, for example, a number of years ago, we identified one of our primaries had very few young people going on to further or higher education. And we've also identified 2 of our primaries where the numeracy levels were dropping off after they come to us. So we were able to work together to look and see, why is that? What do we need to do to improve that? Is it to do with the levels they're coming in at? Are they right? Or is it us? We're doing the wrong thing there. And we did a lot of work around DYW with the primary where they weren't going on to further education, and that's improved. So we're able to see that beginning to improve. So that's part of our why. Knowing what we need to change. So we gather a lot of data. I'm sure you all do, but we questionnaire everybody. So obviously everybody gets a questionnaire. We do it anonymously, and we take the comments on the chin. So we do allow them to come in with anonymous questionnaires. And we then take the worst ones out because they're kind of meaningless. But then what that means is, for example, for staff, a lot of staff are not confident and putting their name to something that they think needs to improve. And it might be because they've not got a great relationship with their line manager. It might be that they just feel they're too far down the food chain. Some of my PSAs have said in the past they don't want to say, I think you should change this, Pauline, because they feel that they've not got confidence on that. So what this does is it gives a really open conversation. We do focus groups. We've changed the way we do focus groups now. Instead of taking young people out of classes, they told us they didn't like that. We take them on cover. So what we do is we commit either for the leaders or for ourselves that we do 2 or 3 per term, and you just take a cover class, and that's your focus group. So you make sure you've got a good range, across the school. It helps with the cover, but also means the kids are not coming out of classes which they told us they didn't like, and you get a really high level of engagement. So I run it as a lesson. I have a lesson ready to go with it, and I run it around how good is our school. So they know what's coming. I get the IT going, and we get a lot of valuable data in that across the year. What we do, though, is we focus in the questions. So as part of our improvement sessions on a Friday, some of them might be looking to see, do young people feel that the toilets have improved? There's a simple one, so you can ask that as part of your focus groups. So I know to ask that as I go, as well as the big questions. We have a learning, teaching walkthrough, which runs, and if you go to the leading learning session, Max will talk about that, but that involves young people, staff from across faculties and the faculty leaders and deputies, and that's really looking at what's happening in classes, what do young people think of the learning, and we feed back to the faculties about where we think it's going really well and where they're really needing to change. They have a focus and we have a focus. So this year our focus has been formative assessment as a school, and each faculty tells us, what do you want us to look at? So it helps with their evaluation as well. We've got the annual learning walks. We're about to have them on Tuesday. So that is based on feedback from Columba. I've not been, but all my deputies have, and they told me all about this fabulous system they do where they send you out walking with a question. And I thought, well, why not use that? Sounds fabulous. So what we've been doing it now for years because it works so well. And what we do is we have a 2-hour slot where staff have time to go away and talk about something. I'll talk about that in a wee second. Stars, clouds and light bulbs, which are behind me. I'm just going to talk about them in a second. And our T-shirt pledges. So these are the kind of ways that we start to try and find out our why. We spend a lot of time looking at the why and what before we actually get to the improvement and the change, because if that bit's solid, then you can actually move forward. So in terms of leadership and change, the improvement walks, they work on, that's a bit small for you, they work on the strategic areas that we as a school are taking forward. So for example, equalities, we were looking at qualities, in particular race equalities. So we sent staff out in groups. That was one of the groups. And they just walk around our grounds. So you have a route and they take off and they talk about the key questions we've given them to talk about. So we do give them drivers about what do you think, you know, have you considered? And then they come back in, so it's about a 20-minute walk, and they come back in and we have light bulbs, clouds and stars. So based on what you've just been talking about, can you tell us, are there any areas that are going really well, such as stars? Are there any areas that you think are really not going well in the school, that's your clouds? And then ideas that you have, light bulbs. And they get shoved into the different areas that we're looking at, and that's part of what we gather. It's going to be too small for you, but it's on the website, you can have a look at it. So we basically then gather all the clouds, stars, and light bulbs, and the reason it's colour coded is because it's into the areas of improvement that we're looking at. So it begins to move towards your improvement plan. And the T-shirt pledges are where we ask staff to pledge, where they will do try something new, try something you've tried before that didn't work, and what would you like us to help you with? So they pledge to make a change themselves, and these go up in the staff room. That's what they all are here. They're about to be ripped down. I left them just especially for today because they're about to start again. But what that does is it focuses our minds in on, right, these are the areas we think we need to change, but what would that look like in our classrooms and in our school? So begin to get those ideas in. Now we involve all staff, so it's everybody. So it's from me right down to the technicians, everybody's in, so we get everybody's views. And then we move to planning the change. We use Simon Breakspear. I don't know if you've heard of him. He has been working with Education Scotland for some time now. It's called Agile Planning. There's lots of planning tools out there. He's just one of many. Okay, but this is the one that we use. We started using it during lockdown. And what we found is it's really focused us in on improvement. What I find is I used to plan far too big. You know, I used to have far too much going on. You'd have millions of priorities. Lots of things going on, and it was kind of that too many seeds scattered approach, you know, so some were taking fruit, but we weren't being focused enough on what we needed to improve. And what the Agile planning has allowed us to do is be really super clear about what we're working on. It is, again, a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year planning cycle, but it's been really clear from that why, go back to the why and the what. We base it on 3 key themes, which is linked in with the Edinburgh Council. So they have 3 key themes. And what we do is we link those themes really clearly to what we then do in terms of our improvement structure. So our working groups are based on the themes. Our pupil improvement groups are based under them as well. And then our staff leadership roles, which say we've got 30 just now, but that's within each of these themes. Doing less well is really important. So we have what's called stand-ups, and that's just an Agile thing. Basically what it is at the CL meeting and at our SLT meeting on a Friday, we take turns to stand up and focus really clearly on one improvement change. So you stand up and you say, this is what I'm focusing on for the next 6 weeks. Here's how it's going. So things are going well, things I've not done yet, and my wicked issues. It's really focused. It's a 15-minute spot where you get to speak, and after that the people around you get to give you ideas or take forward something that maybe crosses over, but you only have 6 weeks to overtake it. So you've got to be really clear that at the end of 6 weeks I'm going to be here. So the weekly check-in is to see, am I there yet? Okay, so we've got that structure in place now in the school. Which allows us then to move that forward. That CL improvement block has dragged them into that process, and they're doing the same thing. We rotate that block round for them. So 2 weeks of stand-ups, so that they've got time in little groups to do that. Then they have a business meeting, which is where they get to tell us everything that's wrong or basically get stuff sorted. And then the 4th week is an improvement session. So we drop in something like the Hayward Review, or I've got a report just now which they might be interested in around assessment, and they get time to talk about it. So creating that time for improvement, because what happens is everyone's really busy and it goes off their agenda, doesn't it? We focus in term 1 and 2, because it's the recognition that term 3 is not about improvement, it's about SQA, we all know that, and we've been really honest about that, which makes it really clear about where we're going. So these are improvement groups. You're not going to be able to see them in the room here, but that is, again, it's on the pack we've shared. But basically, we have 3 areas: health and wellbeing, equalities and inclusion, and teaching and learning. Those are the 3 areas we focus in on. We then, it's all colour coded. Basically, the areas that are then happening under those areas are really clearly linked to whoever is leading there, so that they take responsibility for that and they make sure that those groups are moving forward. So again, it makes it a lot more focused and actually moves forward. And this is the kind of improvement planning we do. So this is just one of the themes: health, wellbeing, and resilience. It's a shame it's gone so small, never mind. So basically, this is staff wellbeing and support. What we have is what we think we should do to make it happen. And over on the right is really clear, focused targets. So we don't do any woolly targets. We don't just say improve attendance. We have to decide whose attendance, by how much, and how will we know. So really focusing in. So if it's improving attendance, we this year have focused on the young people between 85 and 90. So those young people. So that's who we're improving. And what we want is for 50% of them to get to 95. So that was our target. And that's what's measured every single week. You know, whoever's responsible needs to look and see, have they got to that? Why not? What are we doing? Look back again. What's happening? Are we able to change that? Now, you never get everywhere, but if you focus really clearly in on that, if you even get 80% of your target, you've moved forward quite significantly. Very robust evaluation. So those measurable targets make that easy, to be honest. You know, if it's woolly, how do you know you've improved attendance? Because actually, to move a school this size, even up 1 percentage point, is a lot of change. So you need to be more focused on that. You really need to go, well, for example, the under 85s, 2 young people are going to go over that, you know, so being really clear. So those stretch aims and measurable targets make it really good to do those regular temperature checks. So getting in about, do we know what's happening? Now I have, for my senior team, I have fortnightly supervision sessions. So where I sit down and they will talk a little bit about this. So we've got some clear conversation around targets. How's that going? You know, do you need for additional support? But it's also about that kind of coaching and mentoring system as well. You know, opportunity offload. They do an awful lot of really tough stuff during the week, don't they? So it gets them a chance to say, do you know what? I felt really bad doing that one, or this one's been tricky. But it does give us that regular temperature check, as well as those CL and SLT meetings and all our improvement groups. We link it to the ongoing self-evaluation process. So from those, if we've got key questions coming through, that's what we then feed into these focus groups. So if they're really wanting to know, are kids feeling better about bullying? So we'll ask them, you know, have any of you been bullied in the last 2 weeks? Okay, how many? Did you feel it was dealt with? Did you not? You know, why not? You know, so beginning to really focus in on that big question. In terms of supporting the change, so that's all in there. But as we all know, if you don't support young people and staff to be able to do something, it never happens. And you know, time is the biggest barrier to actually getting anything happening. It's not really about money, it's about time. So we create the time. So our Caton Service programme is designed across the year to put time for improvement in. It's heavily weighted in term 1 and 2. Because we know that term 3 is really not about that. So term 1 and 2 is where a lot of our CATs happen, because that's where we know that the working groups will get a chance to meet, where staff can really get in about getting improvements done and moving forward. We have protected blocks, and these are for staff with leadership roles or somebody who's taken forward even a short-term improvement. We might give somebody a day or 2 days and say, you go away and get that done and come back, but we do use time. We pay for that by being, our cover's been horrific this year, but we're quite determined to keep it going. So for example, I will take kids in the hall and do assemblies with them, so that it releases them to go, which works quite well. We do that across our senior team, or we put sessions on, you know, if Human Utopia is on, for example, which we do for whole year groups a day at a time, that releases staff do not need to be in with them, so they can go do something else. So creating those little bits of time cleverly allow us to say, well, we've got time, go and do it. You know, go and get it done. CPD, in-house and external. So we do send people out to courses. I know that can be challenging for cover, particularly at the moment where absence is high. But if you don't do it, how do they get to engage with that outward-looking focus? So we do take the time to say, you go and do that. If it is £200, well, that's fine, go and do it. A good example for us is the VIBE programme with Tree of Knowledge, which we allow staff to go on each year. So it's usually 3 or 4 staff. I invest in that, so it's obviously a cost. They also need time to go to the courses. But what happens is their leadership takes a step forward, and they're able to then contribute back into the school in a much more robust way. So we get that training in place. We also have quite a significant in-house programme. So there's usually 2 options every week. So a lunch and an after school, which are focused in again on our improvement priorities. So formative assessment, there's been lots on that this year. Digital learning is a continuous programme with us. So we have Top Tip Tuesdays where we share what other people are doing, and then they offer the sessions for you to come along. And they can be in person or online, so it makes it really easy for people to come, and we record them. So if you want to pick them up later, that helps with our flexible working staff. So for example, if you don't work a Tuesday and Top Tips Tuesdays on a Tuesday, you can't get any access. So having it recorded means you can pick it up at a different time. So just creating those opportunities. And then we also put funding aside. We don't have a huge amount of funding here. We get very little PEF or anything, but I think it's really important. Even so, what I do at this time of year is I say to staff, are there things you want to take forward that need money? They bid in, and then I seek money. Now, sometimes they're only asking for £100 just for, a set of books to try out, or, a course that I think I'd want to go on, or, Apple Pencils because I want to try that in a particular course. And sometimes it's bigger things. And then we're able to do those tests change, a little bit of funding on it. And then we can take the ones forward that actually are fruitful. Some of them are rubbish, and it doesn't move any forwards. But if you don't take the chance and let them go and have a go, then you never actually know if that's going to happen. So that's in there as well in terms of supporting the change. We also have a really robust learner partnership. So we've been doing this for years now. We did have Grove and Madras College. We've moved over the last 3 years to Grove and Earlston. These are schools where we have a bit of a link anyway. Okay, so we already know them. We know they're relatively similar to ourselves. And I do think we need to challenge ourselves when we change again to be less similar next time. But we've gone similar at the moment. And these learning partners we work with over a long period of time. So normally 3 years, looking at improving together. So it's that outwards looking focus. Now it's about everybody. So it's right down to our kids and being involved with them. Now, they are quite far away, these schools, from us. So some of it's online, some of it's in person. So at the moment, what we are linked to with them that we've been improving, attainment, so that's done through the heads. So we usually have attainment on the agenda. So 3 heads challenge each other on that. We're really nasty to each other. That's what we need. Because when you work with your pals too much, they're all really nice to each other. And you don't really want to say, do you know what? I can spot your 4th year gap there. What are you doing about it? So we've pledged to be nasty. And then we make up later. But that's what we do. Leading learning. So Maxine's been working with deputies at the other 2 schools about taking forward learning, in particular formative assessment at the moment. What would that look like? How can they support each other? We magpie in terms of policies and things going on. We get staff sometimes to go out and share learning. So we'll send staff to Grove and Earlston to go and just share the classroom experiences and vice versa. So we can talk with confidence about what's happening and what we need to improve together. Literacy and numeracy is led by staff who've leadership roles there, so non-promoted staff. And again, they've worked together to take that forward. So they've come up with a collegiate policy on what that would look like in our schools, which shares the work. They've come up with resources, and that's worked really well. And again, they challenge each other really well there. We don't feel the need to go in and micromanage that. We leave them to go on with it. That's their leadership role. So they can go and do it. Equalities, we're quite far on equalities. And our other schools aren't. They've been honest about that. But what we've been able to do is share what we do, but then get our young people meeting up as a group. to look at what does that mean across the schools, and are there ways that we can work together to keep that moving forwards in terms of systems leadership. And then our pupil voice groups have been working together, and that's to widen their horizons. So they went to an escape room together, for example, to sort of break the ice. They've done Lochiel before, where they all went for a wee week, but that's come too expensive. Go to an equity session if you want to hear about that. We've stopped paying for the big stuff. But they also go to each other's schools to look and see, what do our school community look like? What are the big issues for us? We found them very different from the rural settings to the city settings. You know, our kids are very concerned about climate change, and some of the others, it's more about rural issues such as employment and opportunities. So they're able to see the wider issues that are happening. And what then, as a result, happens is they're able to look bigger. So when they're trying to drive our change, it's just not about their little corner of the world, it's about the bigger stuff. And that's worked really well. They then normally would have a pupil council conference, which they arrange. And we invite other schools as well to come along to that, so they can all work together. So it's all about pupil empowerment. That's worked really well for us in terms of looking outwards. Something we did do a few years ago, but haven't since COVID, but we want to get back to, is the main service. What happens is a lot of authorities got a different main service. So our main service is on Tuesday. So let's say Fife, we're in working. We send our staff in minibuses out to schools where they can then go and share classroom experience, talk to subject leaders, see what's happening out there. And it's again about them just getting that outward focus, a bit like what we're doing today, you know, about looking at what else is happening in other schools. Staff don't get a lot of opportunity to do that unless you create those options for them. So that is something we're doing in terms of learning partners. We then have to communicate with everybody about what's happening. So I am completely transparent as much as I can be. Obviously, occasionally you get, this is going to happen, you can't tell anybody. I hate that, I'm rubbish at it. But generally, we're sharing everything we can. We've got weekly bulletins. So I've got a weekly bulletin goes out to staff on a Thursday, to parents and pupils on a Friday. That gives staff a day's notice if anything big's in it before everybody hits the news. Okay, that could be anything from somebody's leaving, or, you know, the extension starting or whatever. So that's in there. And I put everything in there. So I'm really transparent with parents as well. And that just knocks complaints in the head, by the way, because they just know what's coming. So they can get over themselves before it just hits them bang in the face. We have an annual report, which is on top of our SQIP. So the SQIP, I see, is a functional document. That's really about you describing your evaluation. Our annual report is really a collection of our school this year did all of this and it moved us forward. So it's quite a nice, friendly one. It is a bit traditional because we are an old school, so it has things like who the staff are and so on. But it also has, you know, what happens in the chess club. You know, and it can be, they don't have to have been successful. Just the chess club's running. We did some tournaments, we lost them all, but we all had a great time. You know, so it means we're sharing our whole community what's going on. So there's little bits on it, but there's also big bang stuff in there too. So it's about sharing the whole thing. Sharing practice, we put regular sessions in for staff just to talk about what they're up to. And that can be on the learning lunches or after schools, but also captaining services. And the captain's assembly, sorry, I missed them. The captain's lead our assemblies for the young people to know what's happening. You won't see this, but this is our policy. It's all written into a policy that we have, which I've shared on the website. You're welcome to just take. But basically it shows what our cycle looks like in terms of leading change. And that is really how we bring it all together and in terms of how we change. Okay, so hopefully I've covered everything in there. Do you have any questions, or Stuart, do you have any questions coming up on?
No, nothing's come through.
Right, so any questions at all?
Pauline, how is what you've described there in terms of structure and working groups and so on, where does that tie in with things like the working timetable?
So we've played it both ways. We've had it mandatory that everybody's on. We're currently on a no, it's voluntary only basis. That seems to work a bit better for us. It's difficult as a leader to think there's some people don't volunteer to do anything and hence don't do anything with the time. So we've tried to encourage people to get involved. But we still do have our dementors who do nothing. What I've come to realise is actually If you put them in a group, they will literally suck the life out the group. So you're better to move on without them and hope to coerce them in at a later time. So that's the way we do it. So at the moment, it's in our working time agreement as a non-mandatory.
I've got a question on the chat. On the 30 leadership roles you described, do you allocate either time or money to these, or is it understood that these are solely professional development opportunities?
So we allocate both. So our leadership roles are about to go out next week, and they are based on our improvements for next year, and staff have to interview for them. They have to prepare a plan for how much time they need and what money they might need to do it. Most of them are allocated one period a week. So they take them for that time. So that's 30 hours of improvement, but they can tell us how they want to take that. So for some, that's every week. Some will take a 2-day block and get it done. It's really down to them. They are then linked to the senior manager who's in charge of that area, and they have to report in regularly to them. So again, we're making sure something happens, learning from the past where we've left them and got on with it, and then nothing happens and they just took the time. We're now really tight about where you are. Some people do give back time and say, I'm not doing, this isn't getting done, it's not working for me, and they give it back, and that's fine, you know. So, but yeah, both time and money. As okay, well, thank you so much for coming along. It's been a delight. Feel free to get in touch if you want anything else, and I'm going to move you along to your next session now, but thank you very much.